a pseudo quadruple double with 10 turnovers. Not done yet. He was also ejected at the very end of the game with frustrations visibly mounting. So, Tim and Jay, what do you make of all of this? What did we learn about the Lakers in this loss?
So I'm not going to sit up here and be a person, legs, that goes, the Lakers are done. That's not, we both look at basketball throughout the entire lens of how the game is being played. But I've had some conversations over the last several days with some younger players in the league, which is kind of shocking to me because I never heard people say this about a LeBron James team, where they don't find the Lakers intimidating at all. People are actually excited about playing this team. And then when you actually start, I was at the Nets game last night, but I came back home and I'm actually watching the Lakers game for a minute. I'm like, man, seeing how they defend, seeing how they play, the lack of urgency, that last minute and a half of the game, that was almost embarrassing to watch how they actually tried to execute some things. And I think that's more revealing to me than anything. Now, granted, LeBron James hasn't played, but if that's Cameron Payne talking trash to him, I think there's a level of players looking at them and saying, we don't really respect the Lakers. Even though they got a championship, this team is older. They don't play with a sense of urgency. And yeah, they could turn on here and there, but maybe they won't. And maybe a team like OKC, the youngest team in the league last night, beats them at home and they're having fun on the basketball court. I've never seen that before.
Yeah.
Having fun, smiling, young players smiling, playing against the Lakers. That's shocking to me.
And I can see why, because you think, as a player, and Jay, I know you'd agree with this, what makes you uncomfortable is pressure, people in your face, dictating to you where you can go on the court, physicality. There's none of that with the Lakers. So when you play them, you feel like we can run what we want. Everybody's going to get numbers tonight. So that speaks to your point of why teams aren't afraid of them. But what I saw last night, at the end of that game, okay, they're down three different times. Now, I don't have as much of a problem with Carmelo's shot because now it's deep into the game. You don't have much time. And that was probably the worst inbounds pass maybe in the history of basketball. A bullet 25-footer from out of bounds right to Carmelo Anthony's pocket. He just didn't execute the shot. But those other two, those were both out of timeouts, down three, with a ton of time on the clock. And you chose out of a timeout to go to a Russell Westbrook pull-up three, followed by a Malik Monk pull-up three. With all the time in the world to execute, get to the rim, cut it to one, play the foul game, extend the game, what you normally do. But I think the league is so obsessed with the three-point shot that now the mentality is that you have to get a three to tie it with all that time on the clock. And what it showed me was lack of poise. It showed not a very high basketball IQ. Now, LeBron wasn't out there, and obviously that elevates your IQ collectively. IQ was terrible. They added a bunch of veteran guys, Jay, to what you just said, that I think were brought in for the postseason. Therefore, the regular season is just not going to be prioritized. Now, the problem with that is last year you would think they would have learned their lesson. They had some injuries, but they also preserved guys. And they thought, man, we can come out of the 7-hole. We got AD and LeBron. You're not doing that in the Western Conference. So all that talk about as long as they're healthy on April 15th, it doesn't matter where they're at, I disagree with. You're not going on the road in this Western Conference and winning 3 straight series, because in one of those series, you're going to lose the first 2 road games, and you're not going to win 4 out of 5. So I think the mentality around regular season doesn't matter. We blew a 26-point lead to the Oklahoma City Thunder, who are a bottom feeder in this league. To me, that's concerning. Just the overall mentality of this roster and the way that they played down the stretch of that game. They did not get smarter in the offseason. And you saw it last night, and that's one of the worst losses we've seen in the league this year.
I'll just say one last thing. So when Darius Bazley steals the ball at the end, and they're down 5, which is I don't care what anybody says, man. 4 or 5 seconds left. It's a legitimate basketball play. Could he have pulled it out? Sure. But I think that was a very big sign. Russell Westbrook being pissed off by that.
Yeah.
Being angered by that, getting ejected by that. That's how teams view them, right? I can steal the ball. Let me go ahead and flush it real quick. Because that's how they feel when they play against the Lakers.
Yeah.
They feel like, we can do these type of ththings. And I like that Russell was like, no, that's not the right way you do it.
You liked Russell Westbrook's response there, that he got upset at the end of the game.
I need to see a pulse from this team. I know we're at the beginning stages of the season, but I want to see a pulse psychologically that we are going to fight. And sometimes I feel when LeBron James is not on the court, there's a lot of questions around what this team does offensively. And one of the key losses that nobody talks about, Legs, when you lose Jason Kidd to the Dallas Mavericks, all the conversations I would hear from the Lakers camp about conversations between LeBron James and Jason Kidd, how they felt like they were on the same wavelength offensively with how they would scheme for different things. Now you have to make a bet on LeBron James and Russell Westbrook figuring that out, because Frank Vogel is known for being more of a defensive-minded coach, which opens up a whole other conversation, because defensively, they're not good. They're ranked 25th defensively in the league right now. So this is going to put a lot of pressure on Frank Vogel from a coaching perspective.
And you look at the Lakers' wins already so far. I mean, even against the Spurs, it took them to overtime. Or you look against the Grizzlies, it took some missed free throws from Ja to kind of get them out of that game or get them a chance to get the win. And you talk about needing to see a pulse. Russ gets a tech, or it's Dwight Howard and AD. Certainly there's some kind of emotion being shown, but I think to the word you used earlier, it's not joyful.
No.
It's not fun.
Yeah.
There's emotion, there's a pulse, but it's like, it's not fun yet for these veteran guys. And for me, Legs, I feel what was most disappointing was they couldn't stop the bleeding in letting go of a 26-point lead. And you've got all these veteran guys. It's exactly the type of group you would think shouldn't make that kind of mistake or should know how to close out a game. So at what point this season, are you willing to say, I'm starting to feel concerned? Right now, we're like, it's early, they're veteran. What point would you be concerned with these types of things mounting?
We're 25 games in. We're still talking about this kind of stuff. Blowing leads, not beating teams that you clearly have to beat, particularly a team that's going to win probably 20 to 25 games in the Thunder. That's what they're going to do this year. To not be able to close that deal after getting that big lead. If this is still going on, 15, 20 games from now, and they still haven't worked out the dynamic between Russell Westbrook and LeBron, because I still think that is going to take a lot of time to figure out. How does Frank Vogel stagger their minutes enough so that Russell Westbrook can stay true to himself, who he is as a player, and impact the game the way he's used to? Now, obviously, you're going to have to close the game with both guys. So that's a whole nother issue. One possession games, last 5 minutes. What's Russell Westbrook's role offensively? That's going to come. But in the meantime, what about the first 42 minutes? You've got to figure out how to stagger that. So this, to me, major work in progress. I'm not even remotely close to saying, oh, man, was I wrong about the Lakers? We're not there yet. Every team in this league right now is a work in progress, except, I think, Milwaukee. I think that's the closest thing to we know what they are. Everybody else is trying to figure all these things out. The Lakers at the top of the list.
Frank Vogel certainly has his hands full. All right, let's take it from the Lakers and go to the East Coast and take a look at the Nets. You were at the game, Jay Will. Last night, the Nets lost to the Heat at home, 106-93. And while Kyrie Irving is still not with the team for lack of COVID vaccine, there's something else missing for the Nets. The high-level productivity we are used to from one of the most prolific scorers and passers ever in James Harden. Through 5 games, Harden is averaging 3 free throw attempts per game and just 16.6 points per game, way down from his career averages of 8.7 free throw attempts and 25 points per game.
Confident, being aggressive, and it's getting better every single game. Like, as much as I want to get back to just 30s and 40 points, you know what I mean? It's like I can't do that, you know what I mean? As much as I want to, obviously would love to. I had no opportunities to play pickup or nothing this summer. You know what I mean? Everything was a rehab for 3 months from a grade 2 injury that happened three times in one season. So I just embraced moments like this and things like this, and I just keep pushing through it.
James still coming back from that hamstring injury, and he tallied just 14 points in the game, his 3rd straight game, scoring 15 or fewer points. Dating back to last season, he's made fewer than 5 free throws in 8 consecutive games while averaging just over 16 points per game. Harden himself has said his offensive game is limited right now as he continues to make his way back from offseason spent rehabbing his hamstring injury. And also there's been some officiating changes as well. In addition to his health, this offseason, the NBA made rule changes to discourage the calling of fouls for unnatural offensive movements, a change that some are saying could also be directly affecting Harden's style of play, as he's very good at drawing that foul. So, guys, Jay Will, I'll start with you. What's the bigger issue for the Nets, in your opinion? Is it that Kyrie Irving's out, or is it more that this is not the James Harden we're used to?
It's the latter.
Yeah.
You got 2 top 5 players on the same damn team. 2 of the most prolific scorers in the history of basketball on the same team. Sitting there watching the game last night, one of the things that I got frustrated about, and I get it, he's a hooper, right? So for James, hooping every single day is what he does. When you can't do that for an extended period of time, it takes you a second to find your rhythm back. But that's not the key thing. I'm not worried about that. He'll find his rhythm. Every play, Roz, Legs, every play, I'm telling you, watching this game, there was him playing for the contact, not playing through the contact. It's not good enough. James Harden is a bully when he plays basketball. He needs to find a way, and I don't know how many games it's going to take him to do this, but there were so many times I'm watching him look at the ref. I'm like, don't look at the ref. Bully through contact. You weigh 220 pounds. You can move in ways other people can't move. Now, Miami is one of the top defensive teams in the league, and I also think that Eric Spoelstra outcoached Steve Nash. That's a whole other conversation that we'll need to get into for Kevin Durant and James Harden down the stretch with how Steve Nash handles his rotations. But it was him not bullying through contact legs, him looking at the refs every single time. And I will say this, the chemistry between him and certain players are so off. LaMarcus Aldridge, every time they're involved in a pick and roll, they can't feel each other out. You know, he has better chemistry with Nick Claxton, maybe considered they played together last year, but like that just feels off. And James needs to find that legs. If he can't find that, it's going to be a problem for the Nets.
Yeah.
And for James Harden.
Yeah, I talked about, teams being a work in progress. Nothing can be evaluated with the Nets until Kyrie Irving's situation is resolved. We all know that. We need to see those three guys together healthy for an extended period of time before we really know what that is, because we didn't see it last year either, okay? So that's first. As far as James Harden, two issues going on with him. And he let us in his psyche a little bit last night after the game. And I went through it, having an ACL reconstruction, having an also partially ruptured hamstring, training camp. When you deal with that and you recover from it, and you're a guy as explosive as he is, and he's telling you, I'm reluctant to go full throttle because I don't ever want to experience that again, that's part of this right now. He just doesn't have the decisiveness offensively. He let you into his mind last night a little bit, and I think he was honest about it, and he's going through it, and that will get better. But the officiating and the way that they've changed it, there is no question it's affecting him. And even Steve Nash said early on, he thinks he's being unfairly targeted as the poster child for this rule change, in that he's also not getting calls on drives because they've just made up their mind, like, you're not getting calls. Now, I don't agree with it necessarily, but I think it is affecting James Harden in a way that he's got to focus on finishing the play when before all he was thinking about was, I know I'm about to get these free throws.
Exactly.
Jay, Will, do you think that James